This is a good question here. It's probably good timing. Jim asks, how would you advise a church in turmoil, such as divisions for one reason or another, like worship style, mission changes, or a transition, such as between pastors, address potential decline in giving?
Well, you would hope that with transition of pastors, there wouldn't be a great deal of change, unless perhaps there's been some problem with that necessitated the change. Money's kind of a lagging indicator that if things are not going well, the impact doesn't come next Sunday. It will come over a period of time. That's why you want to pay attention to trends. If a church doesn't make its budget for the first time in history, the problem was not December giving. The problem goes back, and it would be better to identify where that starts. So conflict is a little different thing. And it's hard to have a lot of control of it over it on the income side, but you really do need to be paying attention to it on the expense side. And sometimes it's even severe enough that use of a reserve fund to get through a year before a new budget can be developed is a usable thing. And the pandemic has certainly helped us understand why there's a need for a reserve fund. A reserve fund is not intended to just to be a slush fund for not good budgeting, that is to cover deficits. No, the reserve fund should be used if something that we could not predict, and a major conflict often fits that. The closing of a major employer, a recession, a pandemic, those fit this. But then you need to buy some time to get to the new budget. But unless you can resolve the conflict somewhere, it's going to be a problem, or you may have to reset your baseline.
You know, I think one thing that came to my mind when I heard that question was, you know, so often when the conversation around giving in churches is around the church's need for money, the church's budget, and it's very transactional. And that means that if you're unhappy with the church, you withdraw your money, because that's how a transaction works. In fact, the reason that we're called to generosity doesn't have to do with the church's budget or the church's needs or who's in charge of the church. It's, you know, giving is always not about the church's need to receive, it's about the giver's need to give. And so I think the more we can, now of course, if you only say that when you're in trouble, that has to be your constant theology of giving, so that people understand that their reason to give isn't because they like the pastor or they don't like the pastor. It's because it's part of their expression of their discipleship and their faith. And so, that's obviously not a stopgap solution to a crisis. But I think if we kind of pull the lens back and think bigger picture about how we develop a healthy culture of generosity, making sure that's the overall framing that we put, I think makes us a little less susceptible to people saying, I don't like that budget, I don't want to pay for that, I don't like that pastor, I'm not going to give anymore. No, that's not why we give. We give for spiritual reasons, because God wants us to be generous, so I think, keeping those basics in place as much as possible helps too.